Hi, my name is Sherri Sechrist, and I'm speaking to you today at the request of your fearless leader, Roxanne Ansey. She has asked me to talk to you about the art of writing. Apparently, she wants all of her group of servants to help her create creative content that shares the good news about the great work that the Pathway Missions team is doing. So, why did Roxanne call and ask me? Well, I am a writer. I've written two full length books. One is called 12th Year. It's about the bleeding woman from Luke 8, packs in 325 pages. The other book is called The Sin of the Mother. It's about the wife of Jairus, whose little girl Jesus raised from the dead, packs in 350 pages. If you've been around our church for many years, I've written website content, marketing, commercial pieces, all sorts of things for capital campaigns, anything that the session has put together. When I was on session, often I would write that. And in my professional life, I did much writing of speeches, articles for newspapers, newsletters. I've just always been a writer. And yet, when Roxanne called me, my first thought is, why is she asking me? I'm just not that good of a writer. So if you're thinking that about yourself, every writer thinks that, whether we write a little or a lot. The second thing that I want to tell you about this is that I know I'm speaking to two groups of writers. One is a group like me that once I start writing, the words just start coming, and pretty soon I've got what I need. The other is that group of servants who you're sitting there thinking, Roxanne, why can't I just have a root canal without anesthesia instead of writing an article for our newsletter? Well, hopefully I'll have tips for both of you today. I hope you'll find something of benefit. The first thing that I want to talk to you about, I have two tips. The first is the most important, and I call it the power of story. It's not a phrase I've coined. You're very familiar with it in your everyday life if you think about it. The power of story is what makes your meat and potatoes, the facts and the data, alive and real and meaningful. The power of story. So a few weeks ago, I was asked to write an article about the Honey Tour bicycle ride for a local magazine. They just had their ride in their 20th anniversary. They have a lot of riders. They go 67 miles. It takes a lot of volunteers, blah, blah, blah. Pretty boring stuff. So I tried to write the article through the power of story using three voices. One was the voice of Andy Pickens, the president of the chamber, who had never organized an event that required nearly 250 volunteers, what it was like to see 1,500 cyclists leave that morning. I wrote the story through the voice of Bobby Woolard, who started the ride 20 years ago, and that first year wondered, would even anyone show up? And they had 400 riders. I wrote it through the voice of Dave Madden, who goes to church here. He's an avid cyclist. He's ridden in almost all 20 Honey Tour bicycle rides, what it's like to be on the ride, what he accomplishes, how proud he is to have this great ride in his hometown, the power of story. Let me use another example for you, although it's not the written word. On Sundays, when Rick is preaching, and sometimes we're just digging into the Word and we're flipping from passage to passage and we're taking notes, or some of us are sitting and we're just listening, trying to grasp the concept, and all of a sudden Rick will shift gears and he'll start talking about his boys when they were young, or an incident when he was working out at the gym, or flying on an airplane, or something that happened to someone he met, or a woman who came into the church and had a story or a need, and pretty soon we're rapt. We're intent, but we're thinking, I know that person. I've felt that way. I've wanted to do that. I've always wondered about that. Those could be my kids, the power of story. And then we'll always remember in 2 Timothy the story about having to have a spotter if we're going to try to lift this huge amount of weight, because of Rick standing there going, spot! Spot! We'll just not forget that. The power of story makes the facts and the data real. The power of story is so powerful, I can quote to you the world's shortest short story. It's attributed to Ernest Hemingway, but it could be to anyone. The story is this: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. How much does that convey in 6 words? You want to know more. The power of story in your article is what make other servants, people who attend Pathway, read more, and want to learn about your particular mission. So, volunteer stories or servant stories from your missions team. How do you get them? Well, it's easy. I can give you two right away. I have a good friend, Rhonda Henry, who started attending church here about a year ago. She has immersed herself in many different activities, much to my surprise. She's much more active than me. She just returned a few weeks ago from doing hurricane relief. When I asked her how it was, she didn't talk about the work. She said, we did so little. The need is so great. But the woman whose house we were at, she was so grateful. It was a humbling, moving experience. The power of story. Then she also was one of the servants that filled in for Sunday school this summer. And she started telling me that it was really easy and how it worked. But then she said she taught a little fifth grade girl one Sunday. And the next Sunday, that little girl came looking for her. She was an artist. And she wanted to show Rhonda her artwork. And Rhonda was telling me the little girl's story and how enwrapped she was with this little girl and all she had overcome. The power of story. Not too long ago, I met a new friend through Facebook. I'm selling a sofa, just doing the usual Facebook stuff. She comes to my house. We're talking. Of course, she goes to Pathway. We'd never met, but she started telling me not about going to the church or about the sermons, but that she was on Kathy Colomo's team. And once a month, just an hour or two, she said, that's all I can do, just an hour or two. Once a month, she goes and she gives bags to the homeless people in downtown Fort Worth. She said, we give them a bag. It has like a plate and a fork and toiletries. And they're so thankful. It was the most incredible thing I'd ever experienced, the power of story. So how do you get these stories? Well, if your small group meets, that's one way to do it. But if I were you, I would call 6, 7, 8 of the people on my team, and I would ask them, tell me about a moment that has really moved you as you've been working with missions. Don't ask them, why do you serve in this area? We don't want to know why. We want to know something that's moved them, and write it down. And ask this of 6 or 7 people, and you've got the first half of your article for 6 different articles. You've already done the work. Then the second half of your article is the meat and the potatoes. And what I'm going to talk to you there is, I think there are 3 things that people want to know. I went back and I looked at some of the older posts on the website, and a lot of the articles are good, but at the end it says, email me for more information. I would include as much information about time, commitment, and if it's necessary, money requirements. Just get it out there in the open and let people know. Why? Because people do not like to tell people no. We've all been in a store where we don't make eye contact with the salesperson because we might have to tell them no, just looking. It's so much harder to tell your church no. They want to know more, but they're afraid if they email or call, then they're on the list, and it may not be a good fit for their spiritual gifts. So give them as much of the meat and potatoes as you feel you can share in the second half of your article. Then going forward, you can just tweak that, make it a little different, and you've got the second half of your article. And look, you've already written 6 articles for Miss Roxanne. So here's my second tip, and it has to do for your writers and for the non-writers both, and it's editing. Now, if you're a writer like me and Roxanne asks you to say something about the sun is setting, you're going to say, if you're me, the sun was blazing red hot, sinking down into the crimson sky with purple clouds on the horizon, turning all the world gray. When really, Roxanne just wanted you to say the sun is setting. So you're going to have to learn for this type of writing to edit those words out. If you're going to say she walked into the church, came in and sat down in a chair, just say she came in and sat. She's not going to sit up. We know she's walking in where you are. You can shorten and condense your article. How do you do that? After you've written your quote, your power of story, you've written your meat and potatoes, sit down in front of your computer, read it, do your tweaking, and then walk away for a minute or two, come back, and read the story out loud as though you're reading it to a group. Reading it out loud is so much different than reading it on paper, even though others will be reading it on paper. read it out loud. You will find that some of the things you've said don't flow, or they don't make sense, or maybe there's something you need to incorporate that you forgot, or something in there that after you read it out loud, you're like, I don't really need to say that. Read it out loud. Go back, make your changes, let it sit for a minute or two, don't walk away, and then make a commitment. You're going to read it out loud again, and you're going to cut 10 words. Now that's a lot if you're only using 150 words, but do it. Find 10 words that you can take out. After that, let it sit for a minute, go back and say, I'm going to cut at least another 5 words out. Now we're not trying to get your word count down. What we're doing is tightening up the language. You will find that there are phrases in there that you don't need, adjectives or adverbs, which I dearly love, that you don't need to convey your message. In a newsletter, on a Facebook post especially, shorter is always better. You're just tightening up the language. So those are my 2 tips on writing. Let me say that writing is not everyone's spiritual gift, but it is something that can be learned, and no one knows the story better than you and the servants that you're working with. No one understands what you're trying to accomplish more than you and the servants who are out there on the front lines. So it'd be easy to say, we should just get someone else to write it, but you'll lose that power of story. That powerful moment that you want to share with the people of Pathway that will move them to want to be part of the difference you're making in the world. So in closing, let me say thank you for the good work that you're doing, your leadership of believers in our church. Thank you for the outreach you're doing for people in need. We know that you're making a difference in so many lives. Thank you so much for living our mission statement to glorify God and to share the love and grace of Jesus Christ with as many people as you and I possibly can. Thanks for listening. I hope it was useful. Farewell and happy writing.